Is it starting? Okay. Let me just make a short presentation about, well, what is this fellowship and what is the goal that we intended from the beginning. While people keep joining. So Kleros Maker Fellowship, this is something that was born in the context of the rise of DeFi, rise of crypto assets, and context where more and more scam projects started to pop up in the ecosystem. And there was a situation where you have on the one hand, you have centralized exchanges that have a process for vetting what assets they are going to list, which is fine, but they, of course, as you know, well, this produces a number of situations where, well, too much power stays concentrated into those exchanges. But on the other hand, of course, we have decentralized exchanges.
Hello, guys.
Hello.
Yes, hi, this is David Meyer on the phone.
Good, welcome.
Thank you.
I was just introducing.
I hope that I'm not disturbing you.
No, that's fine. Let me just continue. Okay. So this decentralized exchanges have the problem that, if they don't really vet any token, so there is a possibility of a lot of scams and everything that you already know can happen, right? So what is the solution that could help decentralized exchanges have some vetting of tokens and some verification of what tokens should be listed without having the team of the exchange in the end making the assessment of these tokens, which would result in the end in just another, well, point of failure, right? So we developed with Kleros an app called Tokens that is what we could call a decentralized private compliance tool that worked with mechanism design like this one. So you have some user that wants the token accepted into a list, and this list would be of tokens that would be listed into an exchange. So makes a submission, filling a form, and making a deposit, and then other users can check if this asset complies with the guidelines to be listed into this place. If no one have any objection, so this asset is listed, and then the submitter recovers the deposit. But it can happen that another user submits a token and this doesn't comply with the guidelines because of a number of reasons. It's a scam, it's a Ponzi, it doesn't comply with the some formal conditions, whatever. So in this case, some user can challenge it, and then there is a situation where you have a dispute between the submitter and the challenger, and who is going to resolve this situation and this dispute? Well, of course, you guessed, this is going to go to Kleros, and you will have a jury that will assess the evidence, that will consider the case, and then they will make a decision. And in this case, let's say they rule for the challenger, so the deposit of the submitter goes to the challenger, and then this other token is removed from the list. So we launched this in 2019 and works really well. And this list now, like just last week, I think it surpassed 1,000 tokens. It's by far the largest decentralized token list in the crypto ecosystem. And let me show you just one case of how this really can provide a interesting solution to problems that are in the crypto ecosystem. There was a project called ViroChain that was submitted to the list, and they applied to a badge to be listed in the Edfinex exchange. And so in order to be accepted there, you have to comply with a number of situations. And people started to see that the one of the guys of this team, Scott Bingley, like he didn't have like social media presence that you would expect from CTO of like a high profile project. And on the white paper, on the resume of this guy, there said something that he belonged to an Oxford blockchain research laboratory. So jurors actually called Oxford to see if this guy existed, and no one ever knew about Scott Bingley at Oxford. There was no such thing as an Oxford blockchain laboratory. So it was a scam. Someone took the photo from some place and just put this, but it wasn't a person, right? So, and this, some months later, we discovered that on the news, basically, that there is the Chinese police makes a number of arrests or about a scam project called Chain that was a Ponzi, and so Kleros had detected this scam like 8 months before regulators. And so, how many people got scammed in the middle between this Kleros decision and the decision by the Chinese authorities? And this was a really good for us experience to learn how you can use a Kleros application of curation for crypto assets. And this came at the same time that the Maker Foundation was exploring how to expand the base of collaterals that they have for their DAI currency. And especially in the context where one of the goals was to have more real world assets as collaterals. So my idea, what I thought was, what if we use like a Kleros curation to make some type of MakerDAO badge, and projects can apply to this badge, and if they comply with a number of conditions, they can be accepted into this list, and then eventually they could be part of the DAI collateral, and this would be part of the process of onboarding collaterals at DAI and the MakerDAO governance. I imagine at the moment that Kleros could be like a first filter to filter out non-compliant assets, and then of the list of compliant assets, then the Maker governance system process could decide which would be finally accepted as DAI collaterals. So with this early idea, we launched an agreement with the Maker to specifically research how this process should work, and what would be the framework on which this could happen. And we made a very thorough search of candidates to be the Kleros Maker Fellow and research this topic for 6 months and come up with a report that could be then used for moving forward into this process of using Kleros for curation of collaterals into the DAI. And the result of this search was that we found this really great guy and really great securities lawyer called Marvin Coleby, who was our Kleros Maker Fellow. And I'm just going to switch to him so he can explain what he researched and what he found. So Marvin, please, your turn now.
Appreciate the kind introduction. Hi, everybody. Just putting this on so you can see my face for a few minutes. It's nice to meet everybody. Federico, thanks for that. This is a very fun thing to research. So for today, I wanted to ask for comments. Federico, by the way, in these calls, do people unmute to ask questions as things are going on? Or do you work on chat and comments?
You make the presentation, and then people can ask on the chat. Okay.
Thank you. And if I could ask everybody just initially, I have a few different tabs open, and this project was very fun, but there's a lot of different parts to it. And I want to understand how deep and how technical to go into it. If you would rather be shown using applications and platforms, like MakerDAO and Tilaki and the different products we use, we could do that. And MetaMask is connected and we're ready to go. Or there's the side where we could walk through the actual document that was the result of the research. So I wanted to be sure everybody had an option. You feel free to just chat send a message in the chat box if you want like a more detailed dive or to look at the apps. And then I'll build a presentation around it. So I'll give everybody just a minute or two to do that. Can you permit me to share my screen, please? Okay, there we go. Okay, can everyone see a Notion page? Anyone can confirm that everybody see a Notion page? Thank you. Cool. Okay, cool. So a real world asset. Let's start there. Like Federico's presentation said, we're looking at how to get real world assets to be used in smart contracts and vaults on MakerDAO to take DAI against it. As all of us know, DAI is a very stable, relatively stable asset that depends really heavily on the MakerDAO foundation and infrastructure, and now its own community. So when we take what we call real world assets, which are real estate, property, art, stocks, when we take things that are off chain and very difficult to verify, we could seriously be risking the peg and the stability of the DAI and therefore the MakerDAO foundation. So the result of the research was that Kleros, independently and specifically in the use case of MakerDAO, can become and create its own court, and that court is responsible for being a filter between off-chain assets, which we refer to as real world, property, real estate, stocks, and bring them into an environment where they can be traded, bought, liquidated, pooled, farmed on in different environments. And Kleros is the bridge between those. So the result of the research was that what we call the Kleros Asset Court, a court on Kleros specifically mandated to create lists and arbitrate and dispute securities, property, and real estate that are coming into the DeFi ecosystem. So before we get into the results of the research, I just want to show in the products what was happening. So the result of this research was what we just talked about, but the process of the research was mostly a discovery process. It was a 6-month research project. 3 months was a lot of research. Literally, I was like working with Federico and the MakerDAO collateral onboarding process to understand where in MakerDAO, if MakerDAO were the first use case of Kleros implementing the Kleros Asset Court, where would we begin and what would be the phases after that to actually create relationships between the functions and the code bases of MakerDAO and Kleros. That is the final end state. So we had to first understand what was happening to MakerDAO. So MakerDAO has a onboarding process for assets, right? If you are creating a CDP on MakerDAO, there's a list of assets that are going to be able to sit in that small contract and be used as collateral. Similarly, for real world assets, the first thing the governance process of MakerDAO, which we're looking at here in GitHub, has been doing is refining the onboarding process for real world assets. So there is a step-by-step process, which you're looking at right here in MakerDAO, to onboard companies and real estates and contracts into the MakerDAO ecosystem. And this is one of those versions. And the team is constantly updating these versions over time. And with any other version, is going to have a process, but there's different parts that process is going to break. In the MakerDAO collateral onboarding process, by the time we started this project with Kleros, it was in its second iteration. And the biggest loophole in that second iteration is that the real world assets from MakerDAO were meant to go through a 2-step onboarding process. One is a financial audit. What is the finances of this company, this real estate investment company, this private company? What is the financial risk that we're exposing the MakerDAO community to? And the second phase of the onboarding process, what is the legal risk that the MakerDAO community is taking up as a result of onboarding this asset? The MakerDAO community did a really good job of organizing the first phase of the collateral onboarding process for real estate for the financial metrics. And a committee on MakerDAO, which is called the Real World Assets Committee, is responsible for and really good at the financial side. They're not as strong on the legal side, and they didn't have the capacity to do it. So the fellowship was primarily supporting them in the issuance and the process of the real world collateral onboarding process for one company that was a real estate company, and basically taking those documents of that company, auditing those documents, understanding what those documents look like at the company level to be able to create the token to trade. Which I'll show in a second. Excuse me. Right, and then that asset after the MakerDAO process could list on a platform called Centrifuge, which I'm showing up now. And in Centrifuge, all of these different things that you see right here are real world assets. They should be properties. So if I click into this one, this is the final result of a MakerDAO collateral onboarding of a property, as an example. I hope it is. It'll have a financing fee. It'll have like a yield and maturity date. And this asset then became an NFT as well. So each of the different real world assets were meant to become NFTs. Those NFTs sit in here. You verify them in the different contracts. And then you use those to mint DAI. In this case, there's outstanding 130,000 DAI, and then it has a risk assigned to it and a financing fee. This process is obviously risky because you're minting DAI against all of these assets. I remember when we did this project, finished this project, Federico and team, I think this was around $500,000. And the asset value is now almost like 20 million. So it's been growing. You can see the pool has been growing. Actually here, when we finished in August, nice, there's a lot more, 8 million. And I think the one we did was like 500,000. So the DAI is being minted here. And in this process, if the legal process behind this onboarding of companies is flawed, if, like Federico said, you find in a share purchase agreement for one of these random real estate companies that was sold to one person wrongly, any of the clauses throughout thousands of pages of paperwork can be catastrophic to the stability of the DAI and the integrity of the entire crypto ecosystem, not just the MakerDAO community. So without a legal onboarding process, without like a way to list the real world assets and verify them and verify the legal things, we like exposing the entire community to a lot of risk. So with Kleros, we went deep into like, this is a list of all of the different companies that are being onboarded onto MakerDAO real estate assets. We take those, break apart those documents, and then come together and suggest a 3-step process for Kleros to be the infrastructure to support this. And where it starts is in Kleros, we were talking about the curate feature and then the tokens feature. In Kleros, there's products, and then here's the core. In the core, the final suggestion and the final state of a relationship for Kleros to basically be the platform to curate and clean real world assets that enter the DeFi world. It will essentially start at the Kleros core. And if you have on Tinaki, for example, someone has a dispute and says, yo, I think that this NFT and these documents that I've seen are incorrect or not stored in the right way, or these shares are questionable, then there'd be a button up here as an example from the UI UX journey. Button says dispute. When you dispute, there is an automatic relationship between the court to be able to process that claim from many, many different platforms or wallets, hopefully one day at scale. And similarly, in this same asset contract, there will be a section down here that says verify this list, or if anybody's ever used that, Zerion, they have a great function for this. You can basically verify this asset using another protocol, like a list. And this would be the underlying list in the different curated list on Kleros. So that was the vision for it, still is the vision for it. But that's huge. So we had to break it up into 3 phases that are being implemented now. With the next steps, we need to hire someone to run this pilot and project full time. The first step is to pilot a very specific asset using the Kleros codes. Today, we've like dissected the problem, diagnosed it, and assisted in the release of one of the assets in the MakerDAO community called New Silver Lending. This is the diagnostic, basically the legal onboarding process done by Kleros on this company and its assets, and then they were listed in that platform that we looked at just now. So the first phase of this is to literally just do that more, which is take some of the companies that are currently nameless in MakerDAO, put them into a list on Kleros actually, and then have that list be curated and overseen by the general court that currently exists on Kleros. So we would not create a new court right now, we would just create a list that has a relationship with the general court. That's the first phase. And we architected that, we put in the criteria for the courts, the judges, what that would look like, the structure would be, what the workflow would be between MakerDAO and communication between different things. It's not yet a protocol or integration, it's first just a communication line and set that up. And then the next phase after that, over the next year and 24 months, would be to actually create a new court, pass a resolution for an actual court in Kleros, which essentially would act as what has been named a real asset court. But really what it is like a decentralized commercial arbitration process. In the real world assets of properties, if you buy a property in Dubai and you're from Canada and there's some dispute that you have, there's a strong chance that it will go to commercial arbitration, which is a global way of arbitrating disputes for securities and real estate investments and property investments, etc. So that is a highly centralized, highly expensive, highly painful, and highly inaccessible space for a lot of people to access. It's really difficult to hire arbitrators in the first place. And secondly, if you're bringing real world assets on chain, that means that by definition, they're moving across different borders all of the time. So you have to build in some level of commercial, or at least mimic the behaviors of how commercial arbitration courts work, because at the end of the day, it's just a style of adjudication. So the Kleros real world asset court would initially have one subcourt beneath it. I hope I'm using the right word, I know that one, called asset listing. That's the one that would take over the function of curating the tokens of real estate, real world assets, excuse me, curating that list, and then over time add on a subcourt for asset claims. So you can claim that I sent this company 5 of these pieces of real estate, or this wallet, I didn't get it back, I can claim and have that arbitrated on Kleros. You can enforce a claim to these different assets and then appeal it. So it looks like a traditional Kleros court, but it's tailored for securities. And here we architected what kind of judges we need in there, what kind of people with knowledge and backgrounds. And the last phase was and is to then scale it. This is a very, very, very difficult problem. And the problem that at least I see in the crypto community right now is that we've been waiting for mass, or how do we name it back in the day? We've been waiting for like mass adoption of crypto and these different financial tools, right? But with that, there's also come like a lot of, again, and we'll continue, a lot of things that are not real and a lot of people who could lose a lot of money. When you tie this whole crypto world and you bridge it to that world of real world assets, like assets that are tangible or assets that are traditionally locked in paper, and you bring them into this world, the margin for error is quantifiable and qualitatively extremely expensive to many, many different people. This transition from like, we have property in the real world to like, it's trading on DeFi is gonna be horrible. And there needs to be a flexible way to scale that. So Kleros' biggest issue is when it has a court, is how do you scale to a point where disputes, claims, appeals for thousands of different real world assets and property types across thousands of different, millions of different, billions of different locked pools of value. How do you arbitrate cases on an hourly basis, a minute basis, a 3-hour basis? Like, that is an extremely difficult thing to do. And it requires a lot of time and effort. But the final phase is getting to a court that can exist across different jurisdictions, different major trade agreements, and arbitrate securities as fast as possible, as accessibly and cheap as possible, and across as many jurisdictions as possible. That's the final kind of vision for where this project is meant to go. And as I understand it, Federico and his team are hiring a great person who might be on this call to take up that workload and execute it. So this is a summary of the project. All of these materials are open source. This Notion page is open. This report is open. All these materials, we carry a lot of the research that already existed. So Federico, as you know, your hand is over. Tons of research went into it, online and offline. And the results are available both in this Notion page as well as in this GitHub repository that is also available called TCR Kleros, where I hope the project will continue. Thank you, everyone. Love to have some questions, feedback, comments, if that is still allowed. Federico, you'll have to tell me.
Yeah. Thank you, Marvin. And if you guys know someone or are you interested in working on this, do get in touch, because next step for us is turn this very good research that Marvin did into actionable initiatives that will result in pilot with Maker. And the opportunity is huge. You know, there are trillions and trillions of dollars in real world assets that will be tokenized in the years to come, and reliable and cheap, efficient way to do this is going to be, I mean, one of the cornerstones of the digital world economy of the years to come. So if you have any question for Marvin, feel free to ask. We have typically we stop at 30, depends on what part of the world you are. It should be 6:30 UTC, but we can take one or two questions if you have it.
Fede, can I ask a question real quick?
Of course, go ahead.
First of all, Marvin, congratulations on the fantastic research, and I commend you on the very detailed thought process. I'm a lawyer, and I'm involved in arbitration, and so I was interested to see that for the asset court, or the proposed asset court, you are proposing to leverage some of the arbitration rules and procedures that are currently existing. And I wondered whether you have given thought to what these might be in order to fit them in the much more immediate, much more time-constrained model that Kleros has pioneered.
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, and I appreciate your comments and feedback. It was very appreciated. I think at some point, in the same way people are going to vote and add to lists, we'll do the same thing with policies and rules. You're correct, and thank you for seeing that and pointing that out. The section that talks about if we're going to build a decentralized court for arbitrating commercial disputes across borders, then we need to leverage the rules and procedures of existing arbitration courts, because all of those arbitration courts are basically layers of governance. And they could get to the point where people just decide to create their own one. So you might say there's going to be a general court that uses an offshoot of the Hong Kong, like a procedure that's in the Hong Kong International Arbitration Center that might not be in the Kigali one. But ultimately, like, as you know, as well as anyone, all of these arbitration centers share from a model arbitration institution, right? And those are relatively similar and basically like components. So in this research, we went through each of these different ones. We provided a summary that I believe should be in this of each of these. And in the core, we broke down kind of like what the initial procedures would look like. This is one of them. We have like just the general. So we looked at each of the different arbitration center rules and procedures basically, and tried to put one together that was like bulky and there, but also build in like some kind of flexibility for communities to be able to decide what kind of rules and procedures they want. Maybe it's going to be based on the volume of assets. So the bigger the amount of money, the more time it takes, the smaller it is, the more the rules are like a smaller version. So build it in such that it's like components that people can like. And I really, really hope that answered your question in full.
Yes, you have. It's fantastic to see you drawing upon tried and tested procedures and try to make them suitable to your project. Well done.
Appreciate it.
Anyone has any other question, guys? Okay, if there are no more questions, then well, the report is already available. You can read it, and we will publish a blog post soon with the main findings, so people can learn more about what we are looking at in the context of Kleros as what we could call a self-regulation compliance tool for decentralized finance. Well, I guess that's it for this week. Thank you all for coming, and we will, well, see you next Wednesday in the next community call. And thank you very much, Marvin, for your great work and for the presentation.
Appreciate it. Man. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye bye.